Lurking somewhere beneath the Atlantic is the Royal Navy Submarine, HMS Vengeance. For more than 7 months, sailors have been eating, sleeping, and surviving without a single ray of sunlight. A crew 135 men strong, spending 201 days in water, consuming thousands of pounds of food. The crew has no choice but to endure, risking failure if they give up. Yet, loneliness is not their biggest challenge. Arguments, resupply problems, and claustrophobia are just some of the issues that make a 7-month journey below the surface of the ocean feel like decades. Today, we look at how submarine sailors survive months in a tube slightly bigger than the average football field, how they resupply, solve disputes, and make critical split decisions that mean the difference between life and death. If you want to honor our brave sailors, comment "honor" in the comment section below. Not every man is cut out for a 7-month stay beneath the waves. The average submarine deployment usually lasts for anywhere between 30 and 60 days before returning to port. Yet, when the Royal Navy's nuclear submarine, HMS Vengeance, set sail in August 2024, none of its crew knew they'd spend the next 7 months underwater. So, the first thing to think of is the living quarters each person has to become comfortable with. Imagine a bunk bed, smaller than the average closet, about 75 inches wide, and just about 25 inches wide, with another 18 inches of headroom. Well, that's about the size of the average bunk bed. And what's worse is that the standard United States Virginia-class submarine only has 94 of these beds that serve 135 crew members working on board. It leaves more than 40 crew members without a bed of their own. But if you served in the Navy, you've probably heard of the term hot bunking or hot racking, which means that various crew members will rotationally use the same bed. At least this means each time a sailor heads to their bunk, they won't be sleeping cold. As one guy finishes his 6-hour shift, the next guy is preparing to start his stint at the helm of the submarine. So, the bed will more than likely still be warm from the person who just got up. This also means that, if possible, crew members choose their bunkmates carefully. And this could be the perfect spot for the spreading of disease, especially if the other person doesn't particularly enjoy using the submarine shower. But at least they won't be sleeping in these beds for longer than 6 hours. Or at least, that was the way it used to be. Nowadays, 6-hour shifts have been replaced with 8-hour shifts. And I know what you're thinking. Why would they increase the length of each shift when sailors are already struggling to cope? Well, this was actually one of the great changes, specifically implemented by the United States Navy. For example, when submarines operated for 18 hours, it meant that sleep was only about 6 hours, with another 6 hours available for things like maintenance, showering, and personal care. In fact, these 18-hour cycles completely destroyed the mental acuity of sailors, who'd be operating on a completely different cycle from the rest of the world. The Navy then changed this, and the shifts were changed from 6 to 8 hours, while the submarine now operated on a 24-hour cycle instead of 18 hours. A sailor now works for 8 hours, leaving them 16 hours to do everything else. And this has substantially increased the quality of life, especially in terms of making sure everyone gets enough sleep. As for their personal belongings, you can just imagine your average briefcase. That's about the size of each person's locker. And they need to store everything they need for however long the mission might be, even in this small space. So let's face it, living in sleeping quarters with bunk beds stacked 3 high and just a little curtain for privacy is not exactly what you'd expect from even the cheapest of hotels. But for those proud submariners fighting for their country, it is more than enough to do their best to the best of their personal abilities. At least one of the best times of the day is getting a warm meal to lift the spirits, and you won't believe how they managed to pull this off in such a confined space. Nutrition. It is perhaps the only thing that keeps the crew of a submarine in the best possible condition to do their job. Yet, the biggest weakness of the submarine becomes a major problem. Unlike your average soldier stationed at a base, a quick run to the grocery store is not available, nor can they order a few pizzas. Everything the submariners eat need to be prepared inside the submarine, so preparation before even setting sail is the most important part of each mission. In fact, these numbers alone will blow your mind. Before the crew even boards, a lot of work goes into preparing for each trip, with food being at the top of the priority list. A whopping 15,000 pounds of food needs to be procured and stored in the sub, essentially coming to 160 pounds of food per sailor if the mission were to be only 3 months long. For a 7-month trip, this number can be doubled. But since there is not enough space for it to load 30,000 pounds of food, it needs to be supplied during the mission, but I'll get to that in a second. So where does all this food get stored when there is barely room to sleep? Well, everywhere. Yes, every single nook and cranny of available space is used for supplies. First, there's the gallery, or the kitchen of the submarine, which includes a few dedicated freezers. Unfortunately, only the food at risk of spoiling is kept in these refrigerators, like meats, fresh breads, and vegetables. The canned options are usually stored in the sleeping compartments, in some cases, even involving the bunks themselves being used as storage. For example, the bottom of the bunks will be packed with canned food, with a cardboard box being put on top of it for the sailors to sleep until they deplete the food enough to use the bunk. Even the shower stalls are temporarily converted into storage rooms, reducing the available facilities, but this will quickly open after about 2 weeks. You see, fresh food is king, and each sailor wants to have as much of it before it gets spoiled, so this is usually the first to be used. It takes about 2 weeks for the fresh food storage to deplete, but this doesn't mean the crew will not have access to their bunks or the utilities for the time being. As the freezers empty, the canned and dried foods are moved for easier storage in the galley, and even easier access for the cooks tasked with preparing these meals. And speaking of the cooks, they are the real miracle workers on a submarine. Considered the best in the Navy, these cooks transform even the driest and unpalatable meals into something that boosts morale. In fact, each day, 4 meals are served from the galley. This might seem like your traditional breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midnight ration meals, but it isn't always served like this. To ensure each member gets some variation, the order of these meals is changed frequently. For example, one morning you might wake up to breakfast, but the next morning, lunch will be served at that time to ensure another person also wakes up to breakfast for their shifts. But what's actually on the menu will certainly impress you. The typical United States Navy submarine starts with up to 1,500 pounds of ribeye, perhaps the best cut of meat ever. They have more than 1,000 pounds of ground beef, 1,000 pounds of chicken breast, 300 to 500 pounds of bacon, and various fruits and vegetables to be consumed in the first 2 weeks. Then, along with the large quantities of canned food, are 5,500 pounds of flour, a whopping 30,000 pounds of sugar, and more than 1,000 pounds of coffee. Those in the Navy are likely to tell you that submarines offer the best food in the entire force, even being served ice cream regularly, while special meals like Thanksgiving can rival even the best 3-star Michelin restaurant. Well, not exactly, but you get what I mean. But whatever goes in must inevitably come out, and even the storage, like cans, needs to be disposed of. Now, you won't believe how the Navy solves these practical issues. The most mind-blowing part of any submarine operation is how they deal with practical issues. You see, oxygen is critical for survival, but so is clean drinking water. And if they want to avoid a breakout of disease, waste needs to be carefully discarded and managed. That's where the miracle of electrolysis comes in. And now I'm about to get a little technical. First, they capture seawater directly from the ocean, but this by itself won't work to create oxygen or drinking water. An electrical current is then run through the water using sophisticated proton exchange membrane cells. This process breaks down the seawater into its basic components, which are hydrogen, oxygen, sodium, and chloride. They only care about the oxygen, with the hydrogen carefully vented back into the ocean, and the rest simply discarded. The oxygen is then stored in compressed tanks. Yet, it is the quantities they need that make this process so effective. Since the average human being consumes about 5,500 liters of oxygen daily, and a submarine crew is 135 men, it means nearly 80,000 liters of oxygen are needed every single day. That means the electrolytic oxygen generators work every minute of every day, as long as the submarine has an electrical current running in the seawater. Then, to solve the problem of clean drinking water, they rely on a distillation plant, which produces anywhere between 10,000 and 40,000 gallons of fresh water every day. The process isn't that complicated, and something you can even do at home if you have the right equipment. They simply heat the water enough to create steam or water vapor. This is caught in tanks, where it is cooled to produce drinking water. Now, it might not taste like your $10 water often marketed in restaurants, but at least it will keep you alive. Better yet is how they get rid of all the waste, especially the carbon dioxide buildup from 135 men breathing and, well, often dropping the occasional fart. To ensure CO2 doesn't derail the mission, chemical scrubbers using various compounds like hydroxide, calcium hydroxide, and soda lime are used. These chemicals bind to CO2 molecules, where it is slowly released back into the ocean where possible. Those atmospheric monitoring systems you see for sale in Walmart? Well, the Navy has the latest and best technology of their own to constantly monitor the quality of the air, sending constant signals to the crew maintenance staff if something goes wrong. So, what about when a sailor wants to relieve themselves? It is a natural part of human survival after all. Well, the Navy has you covered. They don't just simply dump it into the ocean, as you might imagine, but it works very similarly to how an aircraft works. The tunnels have a vacuum flush mechanism, but when a crew member flushes the toilet, the waste is stored in separate septic holding tanks. These holding tanks are then released into the ocean, where permitted. Yes, they can't just simply dump human waste anywhere. The United States Navy permits it only to happen in international waters and at least 3 nautical miles off the coast of any island or country. As for the disposable waste like food packaging and spoiled foods, well, they are placed in canisters, which are about 28 inches in size and carefully weighed down. Once everything has been compressed and placed into the cans, it is ejected with the same rules as other waste. It usually sinks to the bottom of the ocean, rusting over time, and even creating some reefs for fish over time. However, it might take more than one submarine to create the same reef as a shipwreck. All of this comes together and creates a comfortable living space for the crew. But occasionally, people might argue and even get frustrated with one another. So, the Navy has a very strong code of conduct, especially to reinforce the importance of brotherhood. If you think squabbling with a coworker is frustrating, imagine being stuck with 130 coworkers for months at sea. Tension will certainly kick off, and even one man's bad mood can ruin the day for everyone. So, the Navy has a few important rules that sailors will need to follow if they are to endure these long stints. First, no politics are to be discussed. It sounds crazy, but in a world where everyone has an opinion, and politics are causing a great divide, it makes a lot of sense. Next, noise is very important. With the submarine already making noises of its own, it could make it hard to get some sleep. The last thing you need is to have someone amplify this, creating even more noise when trying to sleep. This means that a calm and softer tone of voice is used around sleeping quarters. No doors are slammed, and unnecessary noise, well, that could draw out the ire of the captain. Even more, personal space is something left on the dock, so submariners need to carefully navigate the hallways, all with a coordinated dance through each room so as not to bump into one another continuously. Each member has about 3 to 5 minutes in the shower so as not to waste the critical water supplies, which essentially means get wet, soap up, and rinse. Yet even this isn't the most important part of the brotherhood aboard a Navy submarine. So, what is the most important? Well, it is respect for those who serve with you. You see, one of the most important parts of any crew operation is to trust in the person serving beside you. To get this trust, submariners need to understand the sacrifices of those who serve beside them, and this is where the real brotherhood is born. And when it comes to the United States Navy, serving in a submarine is optional, never mandatory, which means only about 1% of those serving will ever be on a submarine, which creates pride in itself. But as powerful as modern submarines are, danger still lurks behind every corner. And some of the greatest heroes have made a name for themselves in a submarine. Rear Admiral Eugene Fluckey. Following the 1941 Japanese attacks on Pearl Harbor, the United States entered the war, and along with it, they'd fight the Japanese. One man, Rear Admiral Eugene Fluckey, would risk his life above and beyond the call of duty as the commanding officer of the USS Barb. During the 11th War Patrol along the east coast of China, the USS Barb was deployed for just under 3 months. It immediately came across a large Japanese ammunition ship on the evening of January 8, 1945. A 2-hour battle ensued, downing the large vessel and causing significant damage to the rest of the flotilla. Yet, he didn't stop there. Through exceptional brilliance, Commander Fluckey tracked 30 more enemy ships on January 25 in the lower reaches of Nanquan Chiang, Mamquan Harbor. Knowing that retreat was almost impossible and would require a 1-hour run at full speed through uncharted, mined, and rock-obstructed waters, Fluckey did something incredible. He ordered battle stations, torpedoes. In just 9 meters of water, the Barb launched its last forward torpedoes, just 3,000 yards from the enemy. He scored 8 direct hits on 6 main targets, destroying another large ammunition vessel and causing inestimable damage to the rest. It can only have been described as a massive fireworks show for those in the harbor. The USS Barb then turned around and scurried back to safety, avoiding all the obstacles, before Commander Fluckey would sink another Japanese freighter just 4 days later. Following his return home, he was valiantly awarded the Medal of Honor for his mission, earning the greatest award in the United States Navy. But not everything always goes as planned, as U-boat operators found out. During the span of the Second World War, more than 40,000 men boarded U-boats, yet only 6,000 returned, with more than 94% of the crew either falling to the bottom of the ocean with their submarine or becoming prisoners of war. It was such a dangerous time, the crew often said their final goodbyes while still setting sail from port. But what does it take for a crew to spend more than 200 days in a submarine? None of them are forced to become submariners. In fact, everyone boarding a submarine does so by choice and understands what it takes to overcome months without seeing any sunlight. When HMS Vengeance set a record 201 days of deployment, it meant the crew didn't step on solid land for the better part of a year. They had to find ways to entertain themselves, with each movie night being something that lifts the spirits. Each special meal can make you hold back the frustration for just one more week, and some kind words from your mates will inevitably push you through those bad days. In fact, it is the way they sustain their physical health and conditioning that often carries them through these long voyages. Sometimes the gym is a small exercise bike in the torpedo room, or it might be a few exercises put together by mates. Yet nowadays, modern technology can make all the difference. Unlike older submarines or U-boats you see in movies, modern submarines are far more advanced. Entering the conning tower or command center is more like something from a science fiction movie. United States Virginia-class submarines now operate using the latest in computer technology, with radar that is even better than the 5th-generation fighters. Even entertainment has improved with the use of televisions, and occasionally, even Wi-Fi connections through satellite. It might be a slow connection, but reading emails or even seeing loved ones on screen, albeit a little blurry, certainly lifts the spirits. It takes dedication to earn those dolphin pins, enduring tough training and even failure before being a respected submariner. And if you'd like to find out how Navy training works, make sure to check out this video next.